Assalamualaikum everyone. I'd like to share with you once again this framework agreement or the FAB, the framework agreement of the Bangsamoro between the government of the Philippines and the MILF. So all of us are familiar with this. Palagi ito kong sinasabi na this is part of our topic on the peace process regarding this framework. Okay, so the outline: establishment of the Bangsamoro Basic Law, the powers, the revenue generation, the wealth sharing, territory, the basic rights, then the transition, implementation, normalization, the Bangsamoro Basic Law roadmap, na in which lahat na ito na nagawa na-implement na, but uulitin ko as a review, baka yung iba nakalimutan. So, the establishment of the Bangsamoro. So, the first, the parties agree that the status quo is unacceptable and that the Bangsamoro shall be established to replace the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao of the ARM, and the Bangsamoro is the new autonomous political entity. New autonomous political entity referred to the decision points of the principles as of April 2012. Kaya nga, bakit this is parang to replace the ARM? Siguro naalaala pa ninyo, according to the former president, si Pinoy, ARM is a failed experiment during his talumpati. So kaya nga napalitan ng BARM. Okay? So this is now the new political entity. Then the government of the Bangsamoro shall have a ministerial form. The parties agree that to enrich an electoral system suitable to the ministerial form of the government. The electoral system shall allow democratic participation, ensure accountability of the public officers, primarily to the constituents, and encourage the formation of genuinely principled political parties. And the electoral system shall be contained in the Bangsamoro Basic Law to be implemented through the legislation enacted by the Bangsamoro government and correlated with the national laws. So the next, about the establishment of this new political entity, the provinces, cities, and municipalities, barangays, and the geographic areas within its territory shall be the constituents units of the Bangsamoro. The authority to regulate on its own responsibility and the affairs of the constituent units is guaranteed already, enjoyed by the local government units under the existing laws, shall not be diminished unless otherwise altered, modified, or reformed for good governance pursuant to the provisions of the Bangsamoro Local Government Code. Then number 4, reason of the establishment, the relationship of the central government with the Bangsamoro government shall be asymmetric. So it should be asymmetric, meaning we are not separate from the Philippine government, but the Bangsamoro government shall be asymmetric. So the next is the parties recognize with that agreement that Bangsamoro identity, those who at the time of conquest and colonization were considered natives or original inhabitants of Mindanao and the Sulu Archipelago in its adjacent islands, including Palawan and other descendants, whether mixed or full blood, shall have the right to identify themselves as the Bangsamoro by ascription or self-ascription. Spouses and their descendants are classified as Bangsamoro. The freedom of choice of other indigenous peoples shall be respected. So on my part, sabi nga, by ascription, I am a Christian but I am also a Bangsamoro. By the way, during the crafting of this agreement, I was one of the participants. Hindi lang siguro na alam, pero ako nakakaalam. Kaya nga dito medyo matagal nag-usap, especially itong rason na ito about establishment But sabi ko, I am a Christian, dito na ako pinanganak, I can ascribe, kana ascription or self-ascription to be part of this identity as Bangsamoro. Kaya nga, I am a Bangsamoro. Whether I like it very much or take it or leave it, I am a Bangsamoro. I think malinaw yan. I can ascribe or self-ascribe, adscript. Okay? Then the Bangsamoro Basic Law, yung buhay-buhay lang daw, BBL. So the Bangsamoro shall be governed by the Basic Law, na nagawa na din yan. Then the provision of the Bangsamoro Basic Law shall be consistent with all the agreements of the party. Then the Basic Law shall reflect the Bangsamoro system of life and meet internationally accepted standards of governance. It shall be formulated by the Bangsamoro people and ratified by qualified voters within its territory. So, ulitin ko, nagawa na ito lahat. The Basic Law. Then, when it comes to power, the central government will have the reserve powers, and the Bangsamoro government shall have its executive powers, and there will be concurrent powers shared by the central government and the Bangsamoro government. The annex of the power sharing, which includes the principles of the intergovernmental relation, shall form part of this agreement and guide the drafting of the Basic Law. So the central government shall have the powers on the defense and external security, foreign policy, common market, and global trade, provided that the power to enter into the economic agreements already allowed in the Republic Act number 1954 shall be transferred to the Bangsamoro. Then the coinage and monetary policy, na ganun pa rin, di magbago yung pera. The citizenship and naturalization, ganun pa rin. The postal services. So that's the power of the central government. Then another is the parties shall recognize the need to strengthen the Sharia courts and to expand their jurisdiction over cases. The Bangsamoro shall have competence over the Sharia justice system. The supremacy of Sharia and its application shall only be to the Muslims. So matagal din kami nag-discuss dito as one of the participants. Ako Christian, ako nagkasala, so hindi ako pwede doon isalang sa Sharia justice. Ano ay? Hindi man ako Muslim. Then even the indigenous people. Okay? So, it's only to the Muslims applicable doon itong Sharia justice system. Okay? The Bangsamoro Basic Law may provide the power of the Bangsamoro government to accredit halal certifying bodies in the Bangsamoro. Kaya nga ito, nagiging issue din ito. And until today, kasi yung iba kahit na hindi accredited, naglalagay doon halal na hindi naman accredited. Kaya nga, they have to apply. Makristyano man siya, especially ma-Muslim ka. Hindi lang ka buot-buot pataka maglagay sa restaurant mo or mga establishment mo na halal. Dapat may certification. Then, the Bangsamoro Basic Law shall provide the justice institutions in the Bangsamoro. That includes the competence over the Sharia justice system as well as the formal institutionalization and operation of its function and the expansion of the jurisdiction of the Sharia courts. And I think ngayon mayroon na din yan, na-implement na yan. Then measures to improve the workings of the local civil courts when necessary and the alternative dispute resolution system. And this alternative dispute resolution system from the barangay ngayon, the indigenous people, I think may na-craft na, so mayroon na silang nagawa with this alternative dispute resolution system. Okay? The next is the customary rights and traditions of the IPs shall be taken into consideration in the formation of the Bangsamoro's justice system. This may include the recognition of indigenous processes as alternative modes of dispute resolution. So yung sinabi ko na meron na, and it's also good na in the form of the government, the parliamentary form of the government, mayroon na tayong mga representative from the IP o IPs. Then when it comes to revenue generation and wealth sharing, ulitin ko ha, yung iba very familiar na kayo dito, kaya nga binabasa ko lang kasi a sort of a refresher for all of us. So regarding the revenue generation and wealth sharing, the parties agree that wealth creation or revenue generation and sourcing is important for the operation of the Bangsamoro. Then second, consistent with the Bangsamoro Basic Law, the Bangsamoro will have the power to create its own resources and of revenues and to levy taxes, fees, and the charges subject to the limitations as may be mutually agreed upon by the parties. This power shall include the power to determine the tax basis and the tax rates guided by the principles of devolution of power, equalization, equity, accountability, administrative simplicity, harmonization, economic efficiency, and the fiscal autonomy. And I think may nagawa na ring batas itong ating form of the government ngayon. Kung hindi pa man perfect, pero at least meron na. Then the Bangsamoro shall have the authority to receive grants and donations from domestic and foreign sources. Kaya nga alam natin yung lahat na ngayon na-implement na mayroong billions of the block grants ang tawag. And the block grants are the subsidies from the central government. Subject to the acceptable creditworthiness, it shall also have the authority to contract loans from the domestic and the foreign lending institution, except the foreign and domestic loans requiring sovereignty guarantee, whether explicit or implicit, which would require the approval of the central government. Then the Bangsamoro shall have a just and equitable share in the revenues generated through the exploration. Kaya nga, ang Ligwasan Mars, ito yung hinihintay natin kung mayroon ba talaga yung langis. Kasi during the campaign, makikita man natin na ang mga tao doon na nagluluto sa lupa. Kasi okay daw. Pero until today, yun yung hinihintayin natin. So exploration and development of utilization of natural resources obtaining in all the areas, territories, land or water covered by and within the jurisdiction of the Bangsamoro in accordance with the formula agreed upon by the parties. Then the Bangsamoro may create its own auditing body and procedures of accountability over the revenues and other funds generated within a bit of region from external resources. They shall be without prejudice of the power, authority, and duty of the National Commission on Audit to examine, audit, and settle all accounts pertaining to the revenues and the use of the funds and property owned and held in trust by any government instrumentality, including the government-owned corporations, the GOCCS. At meron na din yan. Then the details of the revenue and wealth sharing engagement between the central government and the Bangsamoro government shall be agreed upon by the parties. The annex of wealth sharing shall form part of this agreement. Then the number 7, there shall be the intergovernmental fiscal policy board composed of the representatives of the Bangsamoro and the central government in order to address the revenue imbalances and fluctuation in the regional financial needs and the revenue raising capacity. The board shall meet at least once in 6 months to determine necessary fiscal policy adjustments subject to the principles of intergovernmental relations mutually agreed upon by both parties. Once full, it may no longer be necessary to have a representative from the central government to sit in the board. Fiscal autonomy shall mean generation and budgeting the Bangsamoro's own sources of revenue. It shared and enter revenue taxes and block grants and subsidies remitted to it by the central government or any donor. I think this is already implemented kahit na hindi pa man perfect. Then the parties shall agree that the sustainable development is crucial in protecting and improving the quality of life of the Bangsamoro people. To this end, the Bangsamoro shall develop through the proper conservation, utilization, and the development of natural resources. For efficient coordination and assistance, the Bangsamoro legislative body shall create by law an intergovernmental body composed of the representatives of the Bangsamoro and the central government, which shall ensure the harmonization of environmental and developmental plans, as well as formulate the common environmental objectives. Then proceed to the territory. The core territory of the Bangsamoro shall be composed of the present geographical area in the arm. So, like letter B, the municipalities of Baloi, Munay, Nunungan, Pantar, Taguluan, Tangkal, and the province of Lanao del Norte, and all other barangays in the municipalities of Cabacan, Carmen, Aliusan, Pigkawayan, Pikit, and Mitsayap that voted for the inclusion in the arm during the 2001 plebiscite. Then the cities of Cotabato and Isabela, but I think the Isabela hanggang ngayon hindi pa kasali, but Cotabato City, kalabo-labo at least nasali tayo kasi nagkaroon ng plebisito. Then all other contiguous areas where there is a resolution, the local government unit, and a petition of the 10% of the qualified voters of the area asking for their inclusion at least 2 months prior to the conduct of the ratification of the Bangsamoro Basic Law and the process of delimitation of the Bangsamoro as mentioned in the next paragraph. So the parties shall work together in order to ensure the widest acceptability of the Bangsamoro Basic Law as drafted by the Transition Commission and the core areas mentioned in the previous paragraph through a process of popular ratification among all the Bangsamoro within the areas of their adoption. The international third-party monitoring team shall be present to ensure that the process is free, fair, credible, legitimate, and in conformity with the international standards. So the next is the areas which are contiguous and outside of the core territory where there are substantial population of the Bangsamoro may opt any time to be part of the territory upon the petition of the at least 10% of the residents and approved by the majority of the qualified voters of the plebiscite. Kaya nga mayroon na tayo ngayong special geographical areas because they wanted to join this government, the BAR. Then the disposition of internal and terrestrial waters shall be referred to the annexes and wealth and power sharing. Then the territory refers to the land mass as well as the maritime, terrestrial, fluvial, alluvial domains and the aerial domains and the atmospheric space above it. Governance shall be as agreed upon by the parties in this agreement. That the Bangsamoro Basic Law shall recognize and collective democratic rights in the constituents in the BARM or in the Bangsamoro. What about the rights? In addition to the basic rights already enjoyed, the following rights of the citizens residing in the Bangsamoro binds the legislature, executive, and judiciary as directly enforceable law and are guaranteed. Letter A, right to life and inviolability of one's person and dignity, right to freedom and expression of religion and beliefs. Okay? Then the right to privacy. Then right to freedom of speech. I think this is in our constitution also, in the Philippine Constitution. Article 13, I think. Then the right to express political opinion and pursue democratically political aspiration. The right to seek constitutional change by a peaceful and legitimate means. Then the right of women to a meaningful political participation and protection from all forms of violence. Then the right to freedom to freely choose one's place of residence and inviolability of the home. Then, in addition, the right to equal opportunity and non-discrimination in social economic activity and the public service regardless of class, creed, disability, gender, and ethnicity. The next is the right to establish cultural and religious association. Then the right to freedom of religious, ethnic, and sectarian harassment, and the right to redress of grievances and due process of law. The second, about the basic rights, vested with the property rights shall be recognized and respected with the respect of the legitimate grievances of the Bangsamoro people arising from any unjust disposition of their territorial and proprietary rights, customary land tenure, or their marginalization shall be acknowledged. Wherever restoration is no longer possible, the central government and the government of the Bangsamoro shall take effective measures for adequate reparation, collectively beneficial to the Bangsamoro people in such quality, quantity, and status to be determined mutually. Then the IP's rights shall be also respected. Number 4, about the basic right, the central government shall ensure the protection of the rights of the Bangsamoro people residing outside the territory of the Bangsamoro, undertake programs for the rehabilitation and development of their communities, and the Bangsamoro government may provide assistance to their communities to enhance their economic, social, and cultural development. So kahit na wala ka dito sa ating lugar, pag you are a Bangsamoro, may karapatan ka din na tulungan, at saka the government will help you. The Bangsamoro government will provide assistance. Social, cultural, economic development. Then the transition and implementation, ulitin ko na isa katuparan na ito, binasa ko na lang para ma-remind tayo once again bago nagiging bond. Then the parties agree to the need of the transition period and the institution of the transitional mechanism. Then the party agrees to adopt the incorporate an annex on the transitional arrangement and modalities which form part of the framework agreement. There shall be a created transition commission through the executive order and supported by the congressional resolution. So nandyan na, in place na yan. Then the functions of the transitional commission are as follows: to work on the drafting the Bangsamoro Basic Law with provision consistent with all agreements entered that may be entered into by the parties. Then to work on the proposals to amend the Philippine Constitution for the purpose of accommodating or enriching in the Constitution the agreements of the parties wherever necessary without deteriorating from any prior peace agreements. Then to coordinate wherever necessary development programs in the Bangsamoro communities in conjunction with the MILF Bangsamoro Development Agency and the Bangsamoro Leadership and Management Institute and the other agencies. The next is the Transition Commission shall be composed of 15 members, all of whom are Bangsamoro. 7 members shall be selected by the Government of the Republic of the Philippines, and 8 members, including the chairman, shall be selected by the MILF. The Transition Commission shall be independent from the ARM and other governmental agencies. The Government of the Philippines shall allocate funds and provide other resources for its effective operations. All other agencies of the government shall support the Transition Commission in the performance of its tasks and responsibility until it becomes functus officio and cease to exist. The draft of the Bangsamoro Basic Law submitted to the Transition Commission shall be certified as an urgent bill by the President. So, nagawa na ito lahat. Then, upon the promulgation, ratification of Basic Law, which provides for the creation of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority, the ARM deemed abolished. Kaya nga wala ng ARM ngayon because na-implement na ito. Then all devolved authorities shall be vested by the Bangsamoro Transition Authority during the interim period. The ministerial form and cabinet system of the government shall commence once the Bangsamoro Transition Authority in its place, and the Bangsamoro Transition Authority may reorganize the bureaucracy into institutions of governance appropriate thereto. Then the Bangsamoro Transition Authority shall ensure that the continued function of the government in the area of autonomy is exercised in pursuant to its mandate under the Basic Law. The Bangsamoro Transition Authority shall be immediately replaced in 2016 upon the election and assumption of the members of the Bangsamoro Legislative Assembly and the formation of the Bangsamoro government. There shall be a created third-party monitoring team to be composed of the international bodies as well as the domestic groups to monitor the implementation of all the agreements. Then at the end of the transition period, the government of the Philippines and the MILF peace negotiating panels, together with the Malaysian facilitator and the third-party monitoring team, shall convene a meeting to review, assess, or evaluate the implementation of all agreements and the progress of the transition. An exit document officially terminating the peace negotiation may be crafted and signed by both parties if and only when all agreements have been fully implemented. Then the negotiating panel of the both parties shall continue the negotiation until all issues are resolved and all agreements implemented. Then when it comes to normalization, natupad ba ito? I think may isa katuparan naman, pero hindi, kahit na hindi perfect, pero at least nagawa na. Kasi agreement ito. The parties agreed that normalization is vital to the peace process. It is through normalization that communities, upon return to the conditions where they can achieve their desired quality of life, which includes the pursuit of sustainable livelihoods and political participation within a peaceful, deliberative society. Kaya nga, it's part of the peace process, itong normalization. Then the aim of normalization is to ensure human security of the Bangsamoro. Normalization helps build a society that is committed to a basic human rights where individuals are free from fear of violence or crime, and where a long-held traditions and value continue to be honored. Human insecurity embraces a wide range of issues that would include violation of human and civil rights, social political injustice, and impunity. So, as a matter of principle, it is essential that policing, structure, and agreement are such that the police service is professional and free from partisan political control. The police system shall be civilian in character so that it is effective and efficient in law enforcement, fair and impartial, as well as accountable under the law for its action, and responsible both of the central government and the Bangsamoro government and to its communities it serves. So, kaya nga, mayroon tayong tinatawag na Bangsamoro Police. Isa din ako sa instructor doon. So, parang may dalawang batch na nag-graduate because of this normalization. At madagdagan pa yan, I think, thousands, 5,000 kailangan. Pero ang nag-graduate, mga 200, kasi yung iba, nag-quit, hindi nakasurvive. But this normalization still continues. Kaya nga, ang peace process tuloy-tuloy. That's why it's a process. An intergovernmental commission shall be organized by the parties to recommend appropriate policing within the area. The commission shall be composed of representatives from the parties and may invite local or international experts on the law enforcement to assist the commission in its work. Then the MILF shall undertake a graduate program for the commissioning of its forces so that they are put beyond use. And I think natupad na rin ito. Okay? Pero ulitin ko, hindi man perfect kasi may politika din dito, whether we like it or not. Tama ba, police? Kasama nating police dito, alam niya yon. Then in a phased and gradual manner, all law enforcement function shall be transferred from the Armed Forces of the Philippines to a police force of the Bangsamoro. The parties agree to continue negotiations on the form, functions, and relationship with the police force of the Bangsamoro, taking into consideration the result of the independent review process mentioned in paragraph 4. Then the Joint Coordinating Committee on Cessation of Hostilities, the JCCH, as well as the Ad Hoc Joint Action Group, the ADJAG, with the participation of the International Monitoring Team, or IMT, shall continue to monitor the ceasefire agreement until the full decommissioning of the MILF forces. This existing coordination mechanism shall be the basis for the creation of the Joint Normalization Committee to ensure that coordination between the government and the remaining MILF forces, and through which MILF shall assist in maintaining peace and order in the area of the Bangsamoro until the commissioning shall have been fully completed. So ulitin ko, until ngayon, tuloy-tuloy pa rin itong part dito, especially, kaya nga, I think, few weeks ago, I am one of the instructors, in-invite sa mga sundalo, yung sa JPST. Doon ang training nila sa Awang, yung training school ng mga military. And I was one of their instructors, and I'm happy for that. Then both parties commit to work in partnership with the reduction and control of firearms in the area and disbandment of the private armies and other armed groups. Nagawa na ba ito? Meron pa rin pa ilan-ilan na nandoon pa rin. They still own firearms. Then the details of normalization process and timetables for the decommissioning shall be in the annex or normalization and shall form part of this agreement. Then the parties agree to intensify the development efforts for rehabilitation, reconstruction and development of the Bangsamoro, and institute programs to address the needs of the MILF combatants, internally displaced person, and the poverty-striking communities. Kaya nga part of this, may mga pabahay na rin sa ating mga dating mga combatants. Nakikita na natin yon. Then the parties recognize the need to attract multi-donor country support, assistance, and pledges to the normalization process. For this purpose, the trust fund shall be established through which urgent support, recurrent, and investment budget costs will be released with efficiency, transparency, and accountability. The parties agree to adopt criteria for the eligible financing scheme, such as priority areas of capacity building, institutional strengthening, impact programs to address imbalances of the development and infrastructures and economic facilitation for return to a normal life affecting combatant and non-combatant element to the MILF, indigenous people, women, children, and internally displaced person. The next is the parties agreed to work out a program for transitional justice to address the legitimacy grievances of the Bangsamoro people, correct historical injustices, and address human rights violation. So that's part of the normalization. So itong roadmap, natapos na rin ito. Sabi ko, this is just a form of review. The President issue the Executive Order creating the Bangsamoro Transition Commission. Okay. Then the Bangsamoro Transition Commission draft the basic law and if necessary work for the proposal to amend the Constitution. Okay. Then the draft basic law be submitted to the urgent bill by the President. Natapos na yan. Then Congress passes the basic law. Then the basic law is ratified by the people in affected area. So lahat nagawa na ito. So with this, I hope na re-review tayo with this agreement. Kasi ulitin ko, this is part of the peace process na yung alam na at least na-refresh din tayo. So I hope learn something. God bless everyone. Salamat, daghang salamat, dalaygon ang Dios. This is your friend, Brother JoArs Alferez.